Okay, guys, let's keep going here. I didn't want to leave you all hanging with just one video and just one site today. Let's see if we can soldier on a little farther and get a few more sites under our belt so we don't sound so kooky. Baalbek was one of the sites that I knew a little bit more about and I looked at a little closer. So that's why I was able to spend more time talking about it. And of course, introducing all those topics, took a little while. So now we're just gonna kind of keep on going. So if you have not already, please watch part 1. I can answer some more questions, but I try to explain a lot of what we're gonna talk about in part 1. So here we go. Second spot. This is one that I have seen before, and I had known that it had bevel blocks. I just thought they were an anomaly at the time. At this point, I hadn't even connected them to any other sites, but I knew that these bevel blocks were some of the bigger ones that I have ever seen. Not the biggest, there are some bigger ones, but just the same dimensions as well, the irregular dimensions, the sometimes not 90-degree angles. So some of the hallmarks were popping out right away, and this was why this site, the Nimrod's Fortress in Israel, this is why this site popped into my head as number 2. So this site, there's a lot more to it. There's a lot more pictures. I just wanted to, get the best pictures. A lot of the sites that I go through, you can spend hours looking through all the pictures, but I tried to just give you the best ones. You can go in and research more if you want to. It's a pretty deep rabbit hole. I haven't found the bottom of it yet. So let's look at this wall here and see if we can pick out some more anomalies than just the bevel blocks, okay? So already we know that there are polygonal elements here, and this very strange piece up here, I really don't know what to call this piece. It sits above the lintel. It has a little arched bottom. It's like a keystone piece for the top of an arch. It doesn't seem to really have a function unless it's to do with stability and holding things together. But it's also kind of an interesting decorative motif as well. Just a really interesting stone. Also, I can see some square holes. Again, there may be some spots where we're going to see grass growing, and some of the grass may be covering up square holes. The size of this doorway is about human-sized. Taller people may have to crouch to go in, but that gives you an idea of how big some of these blocks are. Again, we're going to start, we do see larger blocks at the top as well. It's not necessarily that they're only at the bottom. Sometimes we even see smaller ones at the bottom versus bigger ones at the top. But I have to conclude that this is an original structure as well. I mean, this might even be part of, I don't even know, a piece of the bedrock, an outcrop, just a big boulder that they utilized. It's really strange when you get into some of these blocks because you'll see how they kind of just merge into the bedrock here. Did this come out further? Was there more of a bevel and a protrusion here? Was this a structure of some kind? Or is this just erosion, interesting erosion? You'll start to see some streaks and different things. It'll start to get confusing, but we'll try to stay on the right track and stay on the hallmarks again. So you'll start to notice also later builders will be using rubble and fill and mortared stone on top. That will start to become more apparent as we go along. Today, when I was looking at Baalbek, I had a revelation. So this site is in Israel, and Baalbek is in Lebanon. It's not very far away from each other, but I wanted to show you all this picture that I found today, and I want you to look above this lintel. You see another strange arched stone that doesn't appear to be necessary. It's almost like it would have been prettier if the arch was down here and the square stone was above, but they chose to invert it. And over here we see another kind of strange anomaly. I can only assume this was intentional. It looks like the corners of these blocks were mitered to create a kind of vent or opening above this doorway. So I find that pretty interesting. Again, we're going to see all these arches, I believe, are original. They all kind of have a nice, even, rounded shape to them. Not necessarily like the pointed Islamic arches or the corbelled Egyptian and South American, but there may be correlations with some of those sites as well. So I don't want to rule those out. I just noticed that block. That's a pretty precarious block. I wouldn't walk too close to that block. You start to see more square holes again. Square holes that may have had purposes. Other ones, who knows? Some of these upper blocks, they very well maybe could be original. They're precarious up there. I don't know who would be wanting to put them back up like that. So it definitely looks like this place was rocked by a cataclysm and several destructions. But this particular pinnacle here is pretty interesting. The windows in it, I'm kind of fascinated by it. You start looking at these anomalies and you don't even realize that that you're looking at a piece of evidence until you kind of step back and look at it again. But I'm thinking right now this whole structure we see might be original. You see some smaller stones over here that might have been fill from rubble, and maybe there's mortar in there. This later repairs, maybe there were repair efforts that were respectful, and some of these stones may have been there may have been an attempt to put them back in their original locations. Other time periods they could have been completely reorganized. So we got to keep that factored in as well. So just thought that was pretty interesting. That might be a little nub there. More bevels. You can start seeing more and more at these sites the longer you look at these pictures. I'll let you guys dwell on them for a while. I'll try to keep moving. So after Nimrod's fortress, we come to this place in Syria. I had heard about it before. It's really hard to find pictures of. I believe it was from one of the New Earth videos, Sylvie's videos, that I first heard about this. And it's one of those sites that was just really weird to me at the time. And I cataloged it in the back of my head, and I never thought of it again until I made the connection between the last two sites, and this one popped up again in my consciousness. So I'm going to put them all in order of how I've come to find them. So if you want to do this along with me, you're going to have to go down to the very bottom of the page and start scrolling up, because all the new ones get added at the top. So this site, I don't really know much about it. You'll have to go to Wikipedia to see more of the history. But more hallmarks: square holes, bevels, polygonal elements. Some square holes are large at corners for functional or maybe no functional reason. Hard to tell on some of these sites. You'll see them as indentations, shallow, versus the deeper ones. Sometimes you'll see small ones in the middle of blocks in the bevels. We saw some of those at Baalbek. So this is Hosn Suleiman in Syria. Pretty interesting site. See if you can find some more pictures of that site. I'd be interested to see them as well. I want to know more about this place. Next up, the walls of Nineveh in Iraq. I love this photo. This is some GI guy. He's staring at whatever he's staring at over there, and the evidence of our ancient past is right behind him. So this whole wall is bevel block, as you can see. You can zoom in and see more if you want. The coping stones, I really don't know what to call these capital pieces. The stair step design, we're going to start seeing that more and more. They repeat down the length here. I find them very similar to the Andean cross of South America, and of course step pyramid designs. I just think that's a really interesting stair step. It's just an interesting cultural touch on top of the towers that may have also been functional. If you're an archer and you're shooting down between these, you have a little bit of cover. So you know, it's function and it's art together. But you know, plain. There's no inscriptions or flowery designs on this. This is all pretty stark. So I've also found that in one of Brian Forster's recent videos at Petra, there are some places at Petra that also have these stair-step tops, almost identical, except instead of blocks, they're rock carved. So I think that's interesting. I'm not sure if I have Jordan. I do have places in Jordan. I'm not sure if I actually have Petra on here, but I think Petra is highly mysterious, and I think there's a lot going on there, and we need to look at that a lot closer. So, yep, again, this is the walls of Nineveh in Iraq. The capitals are similar to Petra and the Andean cross symbol of South America. Next, I could not believe this one when I found it. You'll see these are bevel blocks over here. Now, where do you think we are right now? Give you a minute. Troy, Turkey. I almost couldn't believe it. Most of this is all rubble built. We have some really strange stuff here. What's the rubble on the bottom and the nicer stuff on top? Reconstructed, obviously, right? What is this about? And why am I seeing bevel blocks, long, slender ones? You know, the really good straight parallel lines, though, parallel rows. Very nice. And then above that, what are these blocks? These are these blocks dry laid as well? And do they look a little polygonal to me? So I find this wall very, very mysterious. I believe this is the only wall at Troy that has them, but this whole hillside now becomes suspect to me. So, okay, we're going to move on a second. Okay, next site. Guess where we are now? Give you a minute. We're in India. That's right. They're all the way in India as well. So, at this site, which is apparently colloquially known as the Great Wall of India, this has some really interesting stones in it. Some of them are bevel blocks, other ones are not. The polygonal ones, some of the bevel ones up here as well. A polygonal piece here. Just very interesting design and execution here. Kind of a cellular design. I'm really captivated by some of these places in India. They're not really like the other places, but at the same time, the hallmarks are there. You see a square piece missing here at a corner. Could be a coincidence. Maybe there are more of these. This is a small portion of the wall, and like I said, some of these pictures are hard to find. I couldn't really find too many in India that show the bevel blocks. There may have been other pictures that had square holes or nubs or something but didn't have bevel blocks, but the main criteria for this album is bevel blocks. So I'm going to try to be faithful to these specific anomalies first, and any other anomalies we see secondarily will just bolster what we're talking about. But we need to stick to the main hallmark of the album, which is the bevel block. So, next site, Ukraine, near Vlad 9VT. This wall, it's a nice little puzzle to unravel. You'll see the bevel blocks. They're pretty eroded, actually. And they'll stop here. And there's a rubble-built structure. You see two little square holes in that block. That's interesting. And then the bevel block wall continues on the other side of these presumed later built additions, these rubble-built additions. They clearly look like the upper pieces fell, which are here, and the top part here. Who knows where they got this from? Some of these pieces from the other courses couldn't get it all the way back up there maybe, or didn't want to, so they just made this little piece. So we still see bevel blocks up high. We see square holes. I find it interesting at some of these sites, the upper rubble structure I'm not sure sometimes whether or not this was backfill from the original builders, because it's pretty close to the edges in some of these cases, and it looks like it was well stacked in some spots. So in some cases these could be later alterations, but in other cases these may be original features. So maybe keep that in mind as well. I don't know exactly how to feel about some of them. We'll see later on some more stark examples, but we have to keep all options open here as far as the devastations and the rebuildings and repopulations of these sites. So also, same site. This stark example, you could call this something similar to what you would see in South America, where you have the superior below and the obviously inferior above. I'm going to have to presume that this is a later addition with mortar holding on for dear life right here, holding this thing together. But everything below is dry laid bevel block. We see more square holes, some in strange locations. Over here, here, one under that watermark, some more here. Just randomly on this wall, perhaps not for a function, but they're there. I find it interesting how the courses lower are still not uniform, but have smooth, straight rows. The middle portion kind of gets a little bit bigger and more polygonal and puffy. Other areas stick to the tighter rows and smaller blocks. It's a very hodgepodge wall, especially up here. These are these are dry laid stones. You'll see more square holes, but they have no bevels. They're just finely dressed stones. So I'd have to assume that everything below the rubble is original. But it's very strange how cobbled together everything looks, even though it all fits together very well. Very strange example, and it gets stranger, guys. Greece, Athens. This is the one that I ended on in my Where I Stand video. You can see the scale with the people in that photo. Clear evidence of polygonal elements, bevel blocks, square holes. Some square holes seem maybe almost purposeful and definitely deliberate. Others maybe not so much. I'm not quite sure. This does look heavily eroded, or at least really roughly hewn, roughly put together, even though it's very precisely laid. So this is a very anomalous site as well. We're talking large blocks like Nimrod's fortress. Not sure what to think about this site, and maybe some other ones in this vicinity that we're going to see that might start causing some controversy. Here's a site I don't know much about, and I saw this in passing, looking for other sites, better pictures of other sites. That's the one good thing about Google, is that sometimes it shows you related images that actually are related. And this is a really unique example that I want to point out that is really subtle at the bottom here, that you would miss if you weren't looking for it. The bevel blocks fade away and just stop. Now these are all dry laid and very tight fitting. This looks original. There is fill in behind them. They're not ashlars, which are perfect blocks. There is fill. Some blocks do appear maybe to be repurposed or moved around, but this portion down here still looks pretty nicely dressed. Maybe this is a square hole under this little bush, and that may be just a crack, but this piece here might have been a square hole that a plant might have caused more of the damage here. That's another thing we have to think of. Root systems cause damage in rocks, and over time could hide the evidence of what a square hole where they might have been. I know that seems wild, but that's something we have to consider. So yeah, this is the Sherwin aqueduct in Iraq. So if anybody has some more information and more pictures on this site, it doesn't look like there's too much to it, but maybe more underground. Not sure. Moving on. I like this example. This is the castle of Showbak in Jordan. This one is pretty impressive, and I believe Wise Up is the one who first showed me this. The entire tower is bevel block. You see a border with Islamic writing. I'm not sure what to think about this, if this is original or if it was recarved. If it was recarved, that means someone had to hang out here and carve their calligraphy into the side of this. So that's not a fun job, but doable. I believe there are other sites where similar scenarios take place, writing on earlier structures, so it's not something to rule out. We do see some gaps. Cataclysm, maybe. Destruction. Obviously the top portion is missing. We see the defensive elements, the castle defensive elements. This would be, for shooting down arrows or pouring hot liquids and all the traditional things that we hear that they're for. Makes you wonder, people who acted so primitively but could build so impressively. It's kind of like us. So, anyway, aside, this might be an arrow slit. You can see the top portion of this block has a square hole, and they utilized it in part of the slit. I believe this shows up in other places as well. So this might be intentional, and again, for maybe defensive purposes. This is a nice little border ring row here, and maybe here too. So I think I'm looking at a original structure here. This doesn't appear to be reassembled, but we have to also consider that if these things do fall apart, they're essentially like Lego blocks, and they could be restacked and repurposed. This wall's pretty interesting. Again, finely dressed, no bevels, but we do see some, I assume, square holes. It's at an angle, can't see very well, but a lot of corners have spots, and the top row is bevel block. You can kind of see how it follows in an undulating way. It's not a straight line, but it all fits nice and tight. So this is an interesting site. Aha! Now you might have seen this before. Now we are in Jerusalem, under the Wailing Wall, or the Western Wall, the Weeping Wall. Now, everyone calls this place into attention because of the large megalithic block above, which is impressive, just like Baalbek, and it has square holes. But look down below. Here we have bevel blocks, and this is not the only location in Jerusalem that has these. There is a large percentage of Jerusalem that is made entirely out of these bevel blocks, and we will see that coming up. Again, the square holes, were they for attaching, moving, lifting, erecting a structure? And you also see that there are some square holes that have, I don't know, that might be plaster, that might be a patch, that could be the remnants of something that was attached to this. I've heard, and I think I've heard speculated that some of these may have been like bits of wood. Sometimes I've heard petrified wood. So I'm not sure whether or not some of these anomalies are original or if these are secondary or maybe even tertiary. I don't know. This is Jerusalem, right? So this has seen a lot of people. So you'll notice also there are square holes down here at the level of the bevels, which is a strange spot. And also you'll notice that the block itself appears to be polygonal. So that's interesting. It's not even a regularly shaped block. So we'll see more of Jerusalem later. We're going to move on. Here, this site is very, very strange. Now, this is the Dragon House of Ochi in Greece. Now, as I say at the top, very strange construction. It's crudely built, yet the blocks are precision laid. There are trapezoidal doors and windows. There is a corbelled arch ceiling that's made from the overlapping large, sometimes rough on the outside, but very well cut on the underside. These are large slabs of rock that make up the roof. There are polygonal elements. So I got a few pictures of this place, but here you can see the background outcropping of rock. This more than likely was the quarry, so it was literally carved out here and built here, I can only assume, and this is just maybe some slag from the production process, or maybe some bits of the roof that have been torn down or collapsed. I'm not sure. There's a lot of rubble around this site, but from the geology, it looks like this would have been good rock to make a structure out of. It seems to flake in layers, so I'm not sure. You know, the skill involved in some of this might have utilized the geology where it was more appropriate, but you know, in other instances, it looks like they went out of their way to make things more difficult. So let's look at some closer images of this site. So here I have given you some highlights so you can see these. These are really subtle, but they're there. They're bevel blocks, and this whole construction is very strange, right? The way they have the lintel for this window is also part of the wall here. The square holes at the corners come together to form the top of this window. I find that interesting. So there's a lot going on with this site, even though it looks pretty crude. The flanking stones for the doorway, they're very crude, but the stones surrounding them are very precision placed. So it's a very conflicting site, we'll call it. So let's keep moving on. There's more pictures. Here's the top. Look at these slabs. They're very rough on the outside, but on the inside they're a lot more developed and worked. Like especially this stone is above the doorway. You can see how much larger it is and how much more it was worked, and it's very geometric. Has a little step on the underside. We'll see more of that in a minute. The perimeter of the building appears to all be bevel block, so it's all the same construction. It all appears to be original, from what I can tell. They chose to put a larger row of slabs along the top to anchor it in, and then I assume this is just earth and backfill with slabs. I don't even know how, but arranged on top in this configuration. So let's look at some more. I love this photo. Look at this is the inside. Look at the stark difference from the outside to the inside. Now here we might see bevel blocks, but again, they're really subtle here, and you notice the blocks are a lot smaller and more uniform inside, at least in terms of rows. So obvious trapezoidal windows, trapezoidal door. Again, it appeared rough from the outside, but you see the inside, it's very well machined or well worked. The upper lintel portion here has a convex curve to it. That's interesting. The rest of the site seems to be pretty square, but they chose to put a convex curve here. That's unique. And again, look at this large stone and how worked these stair step portions are. Or in some cases, these might be overlapping stones. So we got to be careful, and some of these are more impressive than others. I'm befuddled by this site. It is so strange, and I've never seen anything like it. So please, if you guys have anything you want to add about this site, I'd love to hear it. This place, really wild. I'm sure having the Dragon House of Ochi as the name, it probably has some pretty interesting history as well. So that one was a pretty stunning sight when I found it. One more look at the outside. It just blends right in, doesn't it? It looks like it just fell out of the hillside, but this crude little structure has a lot going on with it. You know, it's modest, but it's really impressive at the same time. So let's move on. This site is this is really important to point out to you guys. This one, now I know it looks different than the other sites. If there were bevels, they have been removed, and we only see the edges. Now, I want to draw your attention to the pitted surfaces here, and what I think is going on at this site, which is in Greece, is I believe that this wall, which this is one of the only walls at the site that looks like this site was rediscovered. Look at the crude stairs, for example. The site was rediscovered, and for whatever reason, the rediscoverers did not like the beveled appearance and chose to somehow, with pounding stones or other, devices, it could be as simple, crude and simple as a stone pounder, or maybe whatever, to form this. Maybe I'm just hitting it with another stone, or maybe a bronze pounder would do this. But you can see that it has been the squared bevels have been removed, and it has given the appearance of a more rounded profile. You can see this row here protrudes a little more than the others. I believe this one may have had nubs on it, and they may have removed the nubs as well. One of these border stones, I believe they in stone masonry they call it the border row or the border course. I can't remember all the technical terms right now, but this is a very, very interesting site with other things going on. But as far as bevel blocks, I found this to be a really interesting example. The rediscoverers chose not to keep the original design. They didn't like the motif for whatever reason, so this is how they treated the stone after the fact. I don't believe that this was done by the original builders. It could have been done by the original builders, but it's just so out of line with the other examples we see. I'm just not sure, so I just don't know how far to take it. There are some little indentations here that may have been remnants. Maybe they are remnants of what was once square holes. You see little elements here that are kind of anomalous the more you look at it. So maybe this had more going on in the past, and a lot of it has just been planed back, perhaps pretty crudely. So let's see, we're getting close to 30 minutes here, guys. I think I'm just going to close it up. We have some really interesting examples coming up, so stay tuned for part 3 in the next few days. But please feel free to go through the album yourself and look through all the pictures. And if you have any insights, any kind of feedback, just please, you can leave it in the comments of the pictures or leave it in the comments of the video, and I'll try to get back to you. So appreciate you guys hanging out with me today, and we'll talk to you next time.